This month, the fastest foiling cats in the world.
For us, it's going to be a bit like the ashes on water.
What the new ocean race will look like.
The ultimate offshore sailing monohull, in the opinion of the world's leading designers.
And how the annual battle of the big guns played out down under. But first, 50 years ago, one race changed the world. Now a rerun of the Sunday Times Golden Globe race looks set to make headlines once again. "73-year-old Jean-Luc Van den Heede had spent 190 days alone at sea. He'd sailed 28,000 miles and had led the single-handed Golden Globe race around the world for 160 days. The finish was just 1,700 miles away. But now the pressure was on, as his closest competitor, Mark Slats, had closed the gap from 1,400 miles to just 100. For Van den Heede, this was his 6th solo circumnavigation. His record for the fastest lap of the planet from east to west, against the prevailing winds and current, still stands. But this race was the slowest of his career, and also the toughest. For Slats, this would be his 2nd solo circumnavigation. Despite trailing Van den Heede by 9 days at one point, he'd hauled himself back into contention. It had been a Herculean effort, and now he needed to seal the deal. The finish would be in Les Sables d'Olonne on the west coast of France, where the race had started. Crossing the line would deliver a hero and heartbreak to the two skippers, but no one knew which. The 2018 Golden Globe race had been set up to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the first ever around-the-world race. But the pioneering race had taken a heavy toll. Of the 9 starters, 4 had retired before leaving the Atlantic. One sank just 1,100 miles from the finish. One decided not to finish, but to continue for a second lap before stopping in Tahiti. And one committed suicide. Just one sailor completed the race. Robin Knox Johnston, who not only won the race, but became the first ever person to sail non-stop around the world. 50 years later, in an effort to recreate the spirit of the age, competitors had to sail boats that were between 32 and 36 foot long, and use traditional means of navigation. But sailing around the world in a small, slow boat is tough, whatever era you do it in. And the 2018 Golden Globe had been no different. The race had started on the 2nd of July. Among the 17 skippers that had crossed the start line, Philippe Péchet had taken an early lead in the light conditions. But 15 days later, 4 skippers had retired. Some had broken gear, while others had a change of heart. But the real drama started as the fleet entered the South Atlantic and prepared to round the Cape of Good Hope. Over 4 days in August, 3 skippers retired. Antoine Cousseau made for Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with a broken wind vane and injuries. Philippe Péchet also had a broken wind vane and made for Cape Town, while Henri Wigg, sailing Oleana, retired after being dismasted following a capsize. Meanwhile, Van den Heede aboard Matmut was into the roaring 40s after taking the lead. As the fleet followed the Frenchmen into the south, each skipper knew that the risks were growing with every mile. When compared to modern-day global races, sturdy cruising boats from another era may appear to provide security. Yet their comparatively slow speed often makes them sitting ducks for the violent weather systems that circulate the bottom of the world. Deep in the Southern Ocean, 1,900 miles southwest of Perth, Australia, a fierce storm had swept through the Indian Ocean. Gregor McGuckin, sailing Hanley Energy Endurance, was knocked down and rolled several times and was dismasted in 70-knot winds and 9-metre seas. Then Abhilash Tomi, sailing Thoraya, a replica of Sir Robin Knox-Johnston's Saily, winner of the original race in 1968, sent a short message. Rolled, dismasted, severe back injury, cannot get up. Followed by silence. After trying to communicate further with Tommy, race organisers alerted the rescue authorities. But both skippers were close to the limit of rescue. 2 days later, an Indian Navy long-range aircraft identified Thuraya with her masts lying over the side. The following day, a French fisheries patrol vessel arrived at Tommy's boat and took the injured Indian skipper aboard. His global dream was over, a crushing blow to his confidence and enthusiasm before the start.
I'm feeling very relieved. It's been a very long journey to get to this place and getting the green card. Trust me, it's not easy doing these things based out of India. It's going to be easy sailing 300 days. Racing will be a bit tough, but the toughest thing is, mentally you should not give up. I think I'm going to be conservative, and I've realized that being conservative gives you better results over much longer periods of time. If you can make your sail survive, if you can make your hull survive and mast survive longer, you do a quick voyage.
But for all his determination, the weather had had the final say. Shortly afterwards, McGuckin was also recovered from his badly damaged boat. Meanwhile, of the 8 remaining competitors, Van den Heede passed through the mandatory film drop in Hobart. The French skipper was in good spirits.
I am happy with the boat. Downwind is going quite well. The self-steering is okay, and I think the self-steering is one of the key of the success, but it is not the only one. The preparation is another key of the success, and I think I was very well prepared. I am very happy to have a mast shorter than the others, and I think my boat with strong wind is going better than others.
At this stage, he was leading the race by more than 1,600 miles, 9 days ahead of second-placed Mark Slats. More drama came a few days later when Loïc Lepage was dismasted 600 miles southwest of Perth, Australia. His hull had been damaged and his boat was taking on water. 2 days later, a bulk carrier went to his aid and evacuated him from his boat. Meanwhile, Slats had now passed through the obligatory Hobart pit stop in Tasmania to drop off film. Although he was upbeat, the trip had been hard.
16 days of easterly winds from Cape to Good Hope. 16 days, and I really, you really want to do as good as possible and get close to Jean-Luc. That's my whole plan. And every time it's just, I get stopped every time, again and again and again. Now after Cape of Good Hope, it was really strong winds. Every second day or third day. I remember that I had 4 days in a row just on the storm jib and free reach to the main, and still doing 3.5 degrees a day. I kind of really like 35 to 40 knots at the beginning, but as soon as the sea starts to build up and when the front come past, that's when it gets really annoying, and the seas get too big. And the boats are good. I think the Russes are good boats and they're solid, but they're just too light for these big waves. That's the problem. So you get knocked down a lot. It's just violent, it's very violent when it happens. It's just, a big smack along the side and you're on your side.
But there was plenty more to come. The notorious Cape Horn lay ahead. On the 5th of November, Van den Heede was capsized and suffered damage to his mast. And while he'd managed to stop the mast from falling down, another storm was building behind. Meanwhile, Slats had taken 500 miles out of Van den Heede's lead. December brought more drama in the Southern Ocean as Susie Goodall aboard DHL Starlight sent a distress call after being dismasted. Midway between Cape Horn and New Zealand, she was in one of the most remote parts of the world. 2 days later, she was rescued by a cargo ship, which then diverted to Punta Arenas, Chile, to transfer the British sailor to shore. Then news of another retirement as Mark Sinclair headed for Adelaide. Of the 17 starters, just 5 were still sailing. After 185 days, Van den Heede and Slats were in the South Atlantic heading north. Uku Randmar was attempting to outrun another South Atlantic storm, and Istvan Kopar had rounded Cape Horn, while Tapio Lethin was 7,000 miles behind the leaders and yet to round the notorious headland. 5 days later, and the pressure was building at the front of the fleet, with Slats just 400 miles behind Van den Heede, who'd been forced to serve an 18-hour penalty for improper use of his satellite phone. The light winds of the doldrums compressed the two even further, and with 1,700 miles to go, they were just 100 miles apart. Van den Heede's huge lead had been eroded, and he was nursing a damaged mast. Slats was playing it cool, happy to gamble on a different route to the finish. And after 198 days, the race was fully on. Join us next month to find out who took the trophy. Still to come, the fastest foiling cats in the world are about to be let loose. Plus a classic battle of the big guns. But first, the identically matched Volvo 65s delivered the closest finish in the history of the Volvo Ocean Race. But now this famous around-the-world race is about to change gear. After 45,000 miles, 3 teams were locked in a dead heat to win the Volvo Ocean Race. The sprint to The Hague was the closest finish in its 45-year history. And as the first 2 teams crossed the line, they were just 16 minutes apart after 126 days of racing. An historic climax to the world's most famous fully crewed around-the-world race. But the end of the 13th edition also marked a new chapter. Big changes were in store. After 20 years, Volvo had announced that this was their last race as owners. And while they would continue as sponsors, the Swedish car manufacturers had handed the reins to new owners, Atlant Ocean Racing, led by Richard Brisius, Johan Salén and Jan Litborn. Since that announcement, there'd been much speculation as to what happens next. Talk of a move to the Imoca 60 class, designed primarily for short-handed racing, had been rife for months. Confirmation came at the recent Paris Boat Show, where a newly written version of the Imoca 60 class rule for fully crewed events was agreed. So the World Sailing Show crossed the English Channel to find out more about the plans for the newly named Ocean Race.
This race has been around since 1973, and so it's obviously a big responsibility that lies on us to create a safe future for it, and that's our first and foremost goal, to create the stability, so we see that there is a sufficient number of entries going into the race, a sufficient number of sailors that are doing it. What we've really done is we made a huge move into trying to integrate existing parts of this sport. We've said let's try to join forces with another strong player in the offshore sailing, which is the IMOCA class and the IMOCA class association. I believe in cooperation is very much needed in our sport to grow it for the future. So therefore we now have 2 classes. We have the existing VO65 class, which will remain as it is, with the one change that the crew rule will be more driving to a younger crew. And then we have the IMOCA class, which is very driven towards technology, performance, slightly smaller crew and very fast. They will not compete against each other. It's 2 separate classes in the same race, as it has been before. Last time was in '93, and then it's been ever since the start. For the first 20 years there were several classes.
Back in 2017, before the last race had even started, organisers were looking into creating a new boat and had asked top designers to provide possible design concepts. But the Volvo announcement and a change in the management saw the project postponed. Yet the seeds of change had been sown. Richard Mason had been in charge of the Super 60 project and explains the link between then and now.
Ideally, if we were going to go for a new box rule, it would have been around 62 to 63 foot boat, and of course then we knew there was one which already existed that's this much. I mean, obviously volume wise it's a bit different, but we found ourselves with the Super 16 pushing ourselves into that corner. So we'd already established through a good process where the future of the sport was going to end up anyway. They proved that the foiling concept could work in the last Vendée Globe. Reliability is a key issue, and this was a proven class which has already narrowed down the performance gap a bit. And of course there will be another leap in performance, but it'll be narrower and more controlled. So we felt that it allowed us to embrace the new technologies in a good way, but also to keep the performance right. So it answered a lot of questions for us, but we've still got a lot of work to do to make it all fit.
Yet the plans for the next race also include the old boats, the Volvo 65s.
The primary purpose of the 65 is to allow to start getting people into the sport, offering people the chance to get in and get the experience to be able to grow, to be able to get onto the top end of the sport. And it's really important because especially as we bring the crew number down on the 60s, it'll be more difficult to get in there. And also we felt we needed to keep that class as open as possible. And I certainly know how difficult it was to get a start in this industry, and it hasn't got any easier. And this is one thing to sail in the Southern Ocean, it's another thing to be able to have the seamanship and experience to get through it. And you can only get that one way. That's by going there. You'll be able to make some mistakes and survive them, to be able to learn from it. So that's really what the 65s are there, is to allow very close racing at a very high level, but to impart knowledge so that we're giving stepping stones and a future for people to come through into the race.
Over the years, the course itself has also attracted a good deal of debate. Multiple stopovers have not been universally popular.
We'll have maybe 2 less stopovers than in the previous race, and we will try to keep as much of the Southern Ocean as possible. We need to discuss properly the ice skate rules to make them as safe and as appealing as possible. And then we need to go to Asia, because Asia is a very interesting and important part of our world and our planet. It has to be a very interesting race for the sailors and for the audience.
Clearly, it's still early days for the next edition of this famous race. And while more announcements are due in the spring, there is one key date for the diary: the start, which will be in October 2021. Fast foiling cats, sailed by the best sailors in the world on a brand new circuit. You might think you've heard it all before. After all, the new F50 looks just like the cats from Bermuda in 2017. And while their DNA is indeed from America's Cup, Sail GP is different. These are Cup cats on steroids. And when the 6-boat fleet sets out for the inaugural event in Sydney on the 15th to the 16th of February, Grand Prix racing will be taking a big step forwards. Sail GP was first announced in London back in September last year, as the new fleet was being built in New Zealand.
Well, the project entails modifying and building 2 new platforms of the AC50, which is now called the F50, from the last America's Cup. And it's utilising all those parts. And so we're busily in the process of working to make those parts equal. So we're building a set of light air boards for each boat and a set of heavy air boards. There's a whole new control system that's been developed to go onto the platform. And now with the advent of being able to have stored energy as such, which is from battery power, basically there's energy on tap to be able to make sail adjustments and board adjustments, which will make the boats safer to sail and inherently will make them quicker as well. And it comes down to being, you know, a more sailor-driven event because it's their skill, because they've all equally got the same control system on the boat.
We got a new appendage package. We got new dagger boards, new dagger board control system, new rudders, new rudder control system. We can sail the boat faster and more efficient because we don't have to rely on physical power like in the past. I think it will make it more exciting. Having equal boats and one design boats, you bring more the sailor in the foreground and their capabilities. So the design side is covered because everybody's playing with the same toy. This shows more what the sailors are made of and who can read the race course better.
With the fleet now complete and the teams having spent the winter training, Sail GP starts its global tour in Sydney.
Sydney was an obvious choice. I mean, it's a fantastic harbour, maybe the best harbour in the world. Obviously, the iconic backdrop, Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. You know, I just got to imagine these boats ripping across Sydney Harbour at 50 knots plus.
From there, it's off to San Francisco and then New York for 2 American events. After that, the fleet will be shipped to Cowes, UK, before then heading to Marseille, France, for the final in September. But this is just the start for the new circuit.
And over the following 3 seasons, we plan to build to 10 teams from 10 nations and at least 10 different venues.
So who are the 6 national teams? First to be announced was the British team led by 49er world champion Dylan Fletcher, whose team includes multiple world champions Chris Draper and Stuart Bithell. The American team is led by Rome Kirby, with youth world champion Hans Henken and Formula Kite silver medalist Riley Gibbs in the squad.
Thanks, guys.
France have 4-time NACRA 17 world champion Billy Besson at the helm, along with his long-time crew and Volvo Ocean Race winner Mari Ryu in the team. Ryu's Volvo teammate Liu Zhu is aboard the Chinese team, skippered by former match racing world champion Phil Robertson. Artemis Racing's helmsman Nathan Outridge heads up the Japanese team, that also includes Olympic medalist Ian Jensen and previous America's Cup crew member Yugo Yoshida. The 6th team is the favourite for the opening event, with local hero and former America's Cup winner Tom Slingsby taking the helm.
And obviously we're going to have some serious rivalries with certain countries. Obviously Team GBR, for us it's going to be a bit like the ashes on water. We're not going to let them beat us, basically. There's no chance.
The time for talking will stop when the racing starts on Friday the 15th of February. The Rolex Sydney to Hobart race can be brutal. The annual offshore classic starts on Boxing Day and heads south across the notorious Bass Strait. 628 miles, often into the wind. It's a tough slog to Tasmania. But even when conditions are more benign, the race is a tactical one that starts with boat preparation. Among those with the biggest machines and the deepest pockets, preparing for victory is a big deal. 3 of the 4 100-footers entered into this year's race had undergone major modifications. The most famous super maxi in the race, Wild Oats 11, has taken line honours victory 8 times. Yet despite her long list of successes and a sustained programme of modifications, she hasn't tasted victory since 2014. So this year, skipper Mark Richards and his crew had changed their approach.
We lost our way a little bit there for a few years. We're back on track well and truly over the last 12 months, and then our latest generation spinnaker, which was designed by the local 18-foot skiff boys in the Sydney North Sails loft. This sail's got a beautiful twist characteristic. So the windier it gets, just the head just twists off, which helps our riding moment situation, and it's a very fast sail. We're going quicker than we've ever gone before in those conditions. So and we've done some really cool reaching sails this year, which we've never had before on the boat.
The Blackjack team also believed they'd been slow in the past, but had made more fundamental changes.
Last year we were a bit off the pace. This year we've modified the boat to come more in line with the current thinking, so a longer keel fin. Not that simple, but it's to do with the rake of the fin and moving the bulb aft and stuff like that to stop the boat being so bowed down and heavy air running.
Famous for being a powerful beast of a boat in a blow, Comanche's Achilles heel is in light conditions. She too needed to change.
We've changed the winches from manually powered to hydraulic, which puts us in line with the other 100-footers. Comanche was equipped with manually powered winches in order to qualify for race records. But the difference that's made has been twofold, really. We've reduced our crew numbers, and that probably saves 500 kilos, perhaps, that we carry all the time. But secondly, it just allows us to operate the boat with a bit more agility and trim a bit more aggressively, whereas before, when you had an opportunity to enhance the boat's performance, a short-lived opportunity, by the time you have 6 guys off the rail on the winches, trim the sail, you might have missed the opportunity. Now we can do it the same as all the other guys, so that's made quite a difference.
But while the big boats may have changed, when it came to the start, the race looked as spectacular as ever. In the battle of the big guns, Wild Oats took an early lead, before Blackjack slipped past to lead the field out through the heads, followed by Wild Oats and Christian Beck's Infotrack, who were neck and neck. Behind them, Comanche was struggling to keep pace. But as the breeze built to 25 knots, she found her stride to pull ahead of the pack. On the long leg south, all 4 boats were in close contention. But as they approached Tasmania and the notoriously fickle final leg up the Derwent River, all the teams knew how easily the race could turn inside out. On the morning of day 3, Wild Oats was the first to round Port Arthur, but only just. All 4 Supermaxis were in the hunt on this final stretch. But Wild Oats had taken a jump on the fleet as she stretched the winning margin to several miles by the finish. An impressive win for a 14-year-old boat. Wild Oats 11 was back on top. The modifications had worked.
It's an unbelievably tightly fought contest by all 4 boats. Mate, the guys just did an awesome job, and to be here in this position today is just a wonderful feeling, so couldn't be happier.
Behind them, Blackjack squeezed out last year's winner Comanche in the last 100 metres to the finish after a match race from Tasman Island. Infotrack was the 4th Supermaxi to finish. The big boats may have arrived first, but overall victory on corrected time was still up for grabs. Defending champion Matt Allen's crew aboard Ichiban were fighting for a repeat performance. But in the end, victory came down to a head-to-head tussle between Philip Turner's Alive and the all-female crew aboard Wild Oats 10, skippered by Stacey Jackson. Jackson's crew had led as they rounded Tasman Island. But as the 2 boats headed into the Derwent River, Alive slipped past to finish ahead. Now it was a waiting game to see if they could hold on to their corrected time lead against the smaller, slower boats that were still to finish. At this stage, Allen's Ichiban 52-footer was about to head into the Derwent and was ahead on corrected time. But when they did, the fickle breeze that has dashed so many hopes in the past dealt them a similar blow. As time ran out, overall victory for the 75th Rolex Sydney Hobart race went to Philip Turner's Alive. Next month, cool kit for a new season. Plus, the Sydney Showdown, a Sail GP gets underway.